believe we have everybody on stage. Mallory, Darren, can you hear me?
I can.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I promise we will get some faces popping up here in a second. But just as a quick welcome to everyone, thank you for joining yet another fun webinar that we have going on today to talk a lot about how in the world do we actually measure what our business is doing, especially from a RevOps side of things. We know how tough that can be, and so we are excited to dive into that. So with that, there we go. Now we can see everybody's faces. Perfect. Again, we'll go ahead and get things kicked off. I know we've got a lot to cover and a fair amount of time to do it, but I know we'll inevitably run out of time for these types of conversations. But as always, Mallory, so good to see you again.
You too.
I'm so pumped to have you on here. For those who don't know Mallory, her and I actually worked together many moons ago in a different company. But I learned more from her about how to track the right type of OKR, KPIs, and truly how a well-oiled RevOps machine can be tracked. So I'm pumped to have you here. Mallory, I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thank you. So it has been a little while, but excited to be back. My role is VP of Operations at Nylas, and I've been in the B2B technology space, specifically marketing technology, for more than 10 years now, and Nylas is my first jump over into developer API technology. So it's been really fun. I started my career in marketing and marketing operations, and then slowly progressed over to revenue operations about 3 years ago. So I love it. I also recently took on business operations, so we'll have a nice little segue into the world of OKRs here, I think. And I live in Indiana, and I have 3 little boys, and I have no hobbies.
You have hobbies. It's the 3 little boys.
Basically.
Oh, I love it. Well, so glad to have you again on another episode. And yeah, I'm ready for you to drop a lot of knowledge on us here in a second. Same thing, Darren. It's funny. I was thinking back to this, how long I've known you and how long we've kind of been in these same circles together. Met a couple of years ago at a conference out in Utah, and just have been friends and RevOps enthusiasts together ever since. But I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks. So Darren Fay from Instructure. I'm Director of Revenue Operations and Intelligence, and I support our sales function of our business intelligence and operations portion of the business. My hobby is wake surfing. I like to go wake surfing. And, I've been at Instructure now for coming up on 3 years. Before that, I was a sales leader and business development leader and operations leader and kind of a jack of all trades. And, now I get to focus on my passion of pure RevOps, which is nice.
I love it. As long as I've known you, I did not know you were a passionate wake surfer. I know we've got about 40 minutes left to talk about OKRs and KPIs, but we'll slide at least 30 more minutes of wake surfing in because I'm with you. It's a great hobby, great passion as well. So.
Oh yeah,
very cool. Well,
it's a good time.
Oh, totally. One thing I just did, and for everybody that is online and watching, I just opened up a new poll. Would love to hear how you are actually thinking about tracking your goals. And if you and your business are already in OKRs, KPIs, you do it either via project completion or other, or you don't. But please jump over to the polls on the right side. We'd love to hear from you and how you're actually going through it. So I think the cool thing, and as everybody's kind of voting right now, we'll let everybody jump into it. The interesting thing that I can't help but think about this as a former ops leader and running an ops team, but also watching all of our customers and the entire ecosystem and a lot of our folks from our community talk about this often. We know the importance of it. I think some of the facts and some of the data is already supporting that. We see RevOps as a title and as a job function increasing 400% year over year, I think is the stat that's on LinkedIn. And yes, while the hiring market's a little weird, especially in technology right now, there is no shortage of needs for RevOps folks. I think from a business perspective, putting my CEO hat on, I'm going to measure everything neurotically for my business, and I assume the leaders in your businesses are doing the same. So this is a perfect time for everybody to start to understand not only, yes, we know the importance of it and objectively why we're all passionate about it, but how do we as a business start to track the success of things like RevOps and business systems? And when we make a major investment in a piece of technology, what do we expect to get out of that? Or man, we're overhauling this process and I really need to be able to track, hey, that was a 3-month project that involved 20 plus stakeholders. How do we track the success of that and the process of it and the progress of it? So really pumped to jump into this. What's really cool looking at this poll right now too, 20 folks have already voted and the majority of folks are already in OKRs. A lot of folks are leaning towards the project completion, some KPI folks, and then of course there's some folks that aren't tracking success yet. Hopefully take a few things away from this today and be able to go insert this into your business. So, but we'll move over. Question number one, when we start to think about performance tracking, just 101, there's a ton of different ways. I know I keep throwing acronyms out all day, every day, OKRs, KPIs. I'm sure we can come up with many more of them. How are you all doing this? Mallory, I'll let you start and I'll take this overlay off. That way it's not covering your face the whole time. But yeah, how are you and Nylas tracking everything?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of all of those things together. With an OKR, it's made up of two parts. There's an objective and a key result. Those key results, you really do want them to be measurable, right? So oftentimes your KPIs become the measurement aspect of your key result. Also, a project getting completed on time by a certain day makes a key result measurable. So I think you can really kind of combine these elements together to come up with OKRs that are, compelling and actionable and measurable. But for us, I think OKRs really do drive forward the way that we try to prioritize. And so that's important to me. I think that anytime you're doing this correctly, it's going to help your team prioritize their daily work in a way that helps them communicate, here's what I'm doing, here's why I'm choosing to do this thing first before I do this other thing. And the reason is because it's going to lead us to this result. And I know that's a priority for our business. And that's hard to do, especially in operations, because, everything crosses our desk, literally all of the go-to-market, even product pieces. So prioritization, I think, is one of the toughest parts.
It really is. There's no shortage, and you both know this, being the, I'm going to call it the top of the funnel for requests that come through the business for requests. There's no shortage of those. You have so many things coming at you, and being able to effectively prioritize is spot on. Darren, would love to know from the Instructure side how you and your team are thinking about measuring the success of your business and what you use to track it.
Yeah, so it's funny. I'm very similar methodology. I believe, an OKR is always going to be at the foundation of what you do. A KPI can be a key result within an OKR, but it's never the opposite, right? So you always start with an OKR because the OKR is your objective as an organization. What I find to be the most successful route into, making a meaningful OKR and waterfall down to KPIs is starting with the executive team or the senior leadership team that are going to be your customers, right? The easiest way is if you ask somebody for an objective, everyone always fumbles, right? So you start with problem statements. So you ask them, hey, what are some of the problems you're trying to solve this year? You take those problem statements and then you use those to determine what the objectives are going to be. And then at that point, you build off those objectives with your key performance indicators. And, if you think of a key performance indicator, the key is you should feel really good about having confidence that it's the right metric and you're measuring the right thing. And then you have the performance piece, which you should feel like you're measuring the right area to be successful and it is within alignment of your strategic goals. And then, making sure it's measurable. If you go into OKR principles, the objective always ends with as measured by, right? Mm-hmm. And so making sure whatever you choose, it is in relation to the overall objective. The end result of an OKR and a KPI is, providing visibility and transparency in what you're doing, highlighting value where you can to kind of justify the expense of a revenue operations organization, amongst a few other things.
Yeah. Somebody explained this to me the other day, and it was a little bit of an aha moment for me. So I'm probably going to butcher it, but I'll do my best to say it the same way they did. With goal setting in general, and we can take our RevOps hat off for a second and just kind of put our business hats on, there's a massive difference between why and how. And I think when you start to just use those two words explicitly and in their right context, why are we going after this specific goal? What does it actually do for the business? Is there, I'm not going to go full Simon Sinek on everybody and then start with why, but it's a really good place to kind of start when you're at least creating these OKRs or KPIs or however you're tactically tracking these. But then the how you do it, obviously, this is where it gets really fun on the RevOps side. We get to sit here and create these strategies, create these teams, and really start to delegate around to the whole business, not just to our teams, how to go and actually execute on this. But Mallory, I'm going to come back to one thing. I love it when you're talking about really pushing the priorities on here. I think the underlying theme, and I remember even when you and I worked together and we were doing this at Terminus, doing OKRs, I remember our CFO at the time, Kathy, used it as a leverage point to say, this gives you the autonomy to say no. And I think we all need that. Again, we're the top of funnel for requests coming into the business, to be a goofy funnel analogy. But it's so true. There is no shortage of them, and how we say no effectively is really important. If we're not able to do that, we probably all, at least I know I did this early in my career, I was a yes person. I think it's in our DNA as like RevOps people. We want to go satisfy everybody's needs. So we're going to say yes often. But being able to say no and saying no with grace and a really strong reason as to say why I can say no starts at the very top of setting some of these objectives for your business, whether it be on a quarterly system, annual system. That was one thing I'm going to come back to this exact same question and go one layer deeper. When y'all are setting these, Darren, I'll start with you on this one. Are you setting these goals and OKRs on a quarterly basis, annual basis? How are y'all thinking about that from a business perspective?
Yeah, we're setting ours on a quarterly basis, and we've kind of altered the OKR methodology slightly, right? So we start with the EC. We get their objectives that they're wanting to accomplish, and they may have some key results within that area. We do a cascading effect. So based off of those key results, we look at what we're going to do from our key results that are going to relate to their key results. So I will deliver an objective and a key result that is aligned with the EC. And then at that point, we'll take that to our teams, and our teams will develop the tactical plan in order to outline how we're going to get there. So what are the tasks they're going to go own in terms of an ownership so that they can highlight their successes against that. And, they will also have a KPI associated with the tactical plan success.
Got it. I love that. Mallory, same or different on the Nylas front?
I would say similar. If you just start at the very top and work your way down without any knowledge of what's going on, like on the ground, you're going to overlook things that are important. You're going to miss something. So we also have modified a couple of things for our, benefit at Nylas. I think what we've decided is we're going to go with annual company objectives. And then the place where the OKRs really come to life the most is in the departmental aspect. And so I think that might be the same as EC, what you're saying, Darren. Is that, Can you clarify for me? Is that executive stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Executive. And to your point, we do the executive goals on the annual basis and then drill them quarterly for the departments.
Yeah, I think that helps. And, sometimes it will not change that much from quarter to quarter. And I think those are things that are fine. Being able to handle some of that ambiguity of things changing quickly is, very much an operations sort of trait, very much a startup or a tech company kind of trait. But I wanted to say one other thing, Brad, about your point about saying no. And if you're doing OKRs well, and your key result really gives you a strong why, I think it also gives you a really strong way to say no. And so often our teams are overloaded, they're busy. You try to bring a project to them and they're like, I've got these 10 things to do. I'm just too busy. I can't take on any more things. And that's their default way of saying no. But in reality, we should be able to say, hey, love that request, but I'm working on these things that are achieving this key result. And I don't think this new request is going to achieve that key result. So my why is that I'm really focused on achieving this thing this quarter for the business. And, let's find a way to slot you in after we get that accomplished. So it gives you just that context of, I know why I'm doing things. And that also shows why I'm not doing things, hopefully.
Yeah. Absolutely. I use go ahead, Darren.
I was just going to say, I love how you put that, Mallory, because at the end of the day, I think empowering your team to understand how they can impact the business by each project rather than thinking about project completion. Because I think in operations, you can get so tied up in project completion and not focusing on the overall outcome that they're delivering to the business. So I love the way you put that.
Yes, absolutely. We're gonna switch over real quick because I want to start being a little prescriptive here. We can start giving a lot of advice to a lot of folks that join this webinar to hopefully take some nuggets back to their business. So we'll talk about where we start, but in that same vein, I used this analogy the other day. We like to all be very fluid in how we work. And yes, we need to be flexible. Fire drill comes up here. Let's go adjust there to make sure things happen the right way. Nobody probably on this call has had to go through any fire drills, especially with banks lately. But maybe I still have the hardware in front of it. I don't know, but we're in good shape now. But the analogy that was really interesting to me, Jack, my co-founder, and I were talking about this. From a engineering perspective, that's his whole background. We don't go to our engineering team with things overly on fire sometimes and say, hey, I know you're working on this big rock that y'all are implementing for our product right now, but hey, I just got one customer's feedback and we need to switch over to this rock real fast. Like, no, our engineering teams are so sophisticated in how they run sprints and how they groom things and look at their backlog. Maybe RevOps starts to get that same level of respect. And hey, you don't just get to come in and fly in with a helicopter and say, all right, I know your day is probably oriented to do this thing. Never mind, come and do this. So it goes back to that effectively saying no and saying it in the right posture and everything else. So, but again, we all started somewhere. Y'all have been running this type of OKR program for a very long time, many years, whether it be in the same business or in different ones. What's the best place to start? Mallory, I'll start with you because I know you've rolled it out. I know you got some scorecarding that you do as well. But how do you think about just day one focusing around starting tracking success for your team?
Yeah, I think that having those tight definitions is the first step and the hardest. So before you can track it, you need to know what you're shooting for, right? And I loved Darren's point on asking, what problems are we solving? And inevitably, you're going to arrive at objectives that are solving your problem for your business or capitalizing on an opportunity. As a manager in the past, I have really struggled with OKRs because I felt like the process of defining the OKRs was just adding work to my team's plate when they were already busy. And it was a while that this went on. So what people inevitably do without even realizing it is they just take their existing work and they fit it into OKRs. And it's like, complete this, complete this, complete this. And it's all the stuff you're already doing. And so then it becomes very redundant. It's like, why do we need OKRs if it's just a list of the things I'm doing? And truly at Nylas, it's the first time that I've really gotten into, this business operations role a little bit deeper and learned to understand it better. And my CEO is like fabulous at helping me realize this recently. But if you're doing it correctly, in my opinion, you're not adding any work and you're not just listing out the work that you're already doing. You're taking the projects and the work that you're already doing that you know are going to happen. And you're just clarifying, what will that bring to our business? What will happen because of this? So we're, beginning to implement the forecasting module in Gong. That's a project that my team is actively working on. We've got timeframes, we're kind of like right in the middle of the rollout. So we have a due date for that. And I'm drafting things. I'm like, okay, roll out Gong by this date. Done. OKR. It's like, actually, no, like what is going to happen because you did that? And you stop and think about it and you're like, oh, okay, so we're going to have better predictability in our forecast. We're going to have accuracy of X% against our forecast. All of a sudden, that's measurable. I can improve my forecasting accuracy and I can see whether that came true or not. Does it mean that my team is on the hook for the whole forecast? No, but that's what we are trying to get out of doing this. And so there's two implications there. The first implication is that it really forces you to think about how to measure the efforts and how they could pay off. And then secondly, it relieves this accountability of I'm the only person who can ever deliver my key result. And that is where a lot of things get sideways. And I think I even saw a question in the chat from Danielle about like, how do you decide about accountability? So OKRs, oh my gosh, Brad, your little question thing at the bottom.
How cool is that?
Brilliant.
That's great.
Welcome.
That's awesome. Okay. So as soon as you realize that as an operator, you don't have to be accountable for every single thing, but you can still map your success to your goal where you're trying to take a KPI or accuracy or whatever, it's immediately this weight off your shoulders of like, oh, I don't have to be the person that actually delivers that. But what I need to do is drive clarity, help my team understand why we're doing this, help the sales team understand why we're doing this, and then communicate that effectively across the board. And the place where people get very tripped up by this is that if your OKRs are the basis for your bonus, you have a very hard time reconciling those two things. So when it comes to getting started, one of my first pieces of advice is that I don't think people's bonus should be tied to their OKRs, because you instantly create this accountability problem. And it's a lot easier if you don't have that.
I completely agree. I think, look, we're all humans here. We're not robots quite yet. It's coming faster than we think. I think with some of the GPT technology, but we are, and we are to a certain degree coin operated. And however that coin comes into our bank account, we're going to prioritize how that works. And what you want to do, I think, what you were mentioning is that's totally fine. We should all have incentives that align to the outcomes for our business, but make sure that you're not over-indexing on that or creating too much bias with how that OKR can actually play out for the whole business. So I completely agree. Darren, I'd love your thoughts on the same thing.
Yeah, I want to address Danielle's question, but I also want to start from like the core principles of like setting OKRs and KPIs. Like not every company is going to have confidence in their data, right? And I think you really need to start before you start setting OKRs is understanding and aligning on what those values and fields will be that you need to align off of, and make sure that they are agreed upon in terms of how they're calculated, what they're representing, right? Because I could come in and say, oh, my sales velocity is defined this way, and somebody may define it another way, and get continuity across the team. So like data governance is really important to start before you get to the point where you start developing KPIs, right? And then once you've developed those KPIs, one of the things I love about the OKR principle is OKRs are more strategic and long range. So you look at those, and if you achieve 70% of your key result in the OKR principle methodology, it's a success. There should be stretch goals. And when you go into a KPI, it's more of, did I achieve it or not, right? And so marrying the two in some sort of fashion to where you say, here's my objective. And to your point, Danielle, I think the important part is the objective is the overall principle of the goal you want to achieve. And then you go into the KPI, and there are portions of the KPI where your portion that you own should be measurable, and you should be accountable for your portion, right? But there should be somebody else that is doing another project in tandem with you that also is going to help you deliver against that objective. And the one thing I love about the principles is that as a company, if you have it from the top down, you have multiple people driving towards the same goal, right? And you can make sure that somebody's got, if you have a pipeline coverage OKR, yes, you're going to own portions of that project, but you also have sales leaders who should be held accountable for their portion of that key result and how they're going to finish the pie, so to speak.
Yeah.
You can't bake it with only half the ingredients, right? And so making sure that you start by communicating those problem statements, like I talked about earlier. One of the things we like to do is we start from basically the field. So the people who are doing the work, we collect problem statements. And then what we do is we come together as a leadership team and we review all those problem statements. We look for trends and we look for things that are similar. And then we assess it for impact. And you say, which one's going to impact the business more? And how do we align against these principles to help determine what these objectives should be? And so it does come from the field, and then it's determined based upon impact to help deliver the right result for the business.
That's great. I think the interesting thing there, just to reiterate it, because I know looking through a lot of the folks that are on this call, and I know a lot of these folks personally, so I know a lot about their business and where they sit in the business. I think it's a good reminder. You set these goals and you set these OKRs, and whether they be on a quarterly basis, annual basis, and we're going to come to one of Andrew and Kevin's questions because they're similar in a second. That doesn't mean that you can't ask questions about them partway through and how we track them. Are we tracking them the right way? Not to be overly challenging, but we want to make sure that as we're making these business decisions, we're not just putting them in concrete every 90 days and not thinking about the validity of them and the flexibility of them. So that's a really good point. I'm going to I'm going to switch over to Kevin, which I think we all know Kevin here. So good to see you, man. I love this question. And Andrew, you asked a very similar one. So we'll kind of pop yours up here in a second too. But, interested to learn how you keep the visibility on these. So we talked about creating them foundationally, what to think about. How do you communicate these and keep everyone on the top of mind and the top of progress for how they get tracked? What are y'all using to communicate? I'll let either one of you start.
Yeah, I can go ahead and start. So in the core principle of OKR methodology, right? It's one of the core factors is having regular meetings and making sure you keep it at the forefront of your conversation. So at every team meeting, one of the first topics you're going to be having is how are we trending against our OKR progress, right? And the different key results we have. And the difficult thing is you need to build an environment that's surrounded around the OKR methodology from the organization perspective, because you need to be able to have your boss communicate that to the next boss, and it needs to be cycled up, and it needs to be brought up on QBRs. It needs to be brought up on regular meetings on a monthly cadence as well as a weekly cadence, and highlighting the various milestones within those key results. One of the things I like about setting a key result within an OKR methodology is having the tactical plan, because then you can basically celebrate the successes of each tactical milestone, right? So you do have something to update the team on.
Totally. Yeah, Mallory, what do you think?
I've done this so many ways. Like, I've done it in a spreadsheet. I've done it in Lattice. I've done it in a slide. I mean, some of it depends on which tools you're using and how big your business is. And inherently larger, complex organizations have a harder time making these things readily available and visible. What we're going to do this quarter at Nylas, because we're working on this literally now, is we're going to have all of the departmental OKRs in one simple Google Doc that is shared out with the whole company. And so it won't be as granular as every single person in the business, but it'll be departmentally, representative of the biggest things that are happening and why, right? The key results are all about why. And so we're approaching a low-tech way to make this available and visible to everyone. And then to Darren's point, this does have a weekly component, because if you don't watch them weekly, you will get off track. And so in our weekly executive team meeting, we've got one that's more status update related and like departmental, collaboration, just talking through all the stuff that we need to talk through that's more tactical. And we have a template that we go through each week, and one area of our template says OKR progress, and we just do a red, yellow, green on those objectives. And we talk about that every week. On top of that, my team is very, very entrenched in using Jira. That's how they manage their work and their projects. So what I'm hoping to do, I haven't done it yet, but I've got this plan to have all of our key results in Jira as initiatives. And then I can map our tasks and our epics up to the initiative to show which pieces of work are really laddering up to each key result. And then I can also see how much work is associated with each one. So I'm excited to try that out. I'll let you guys know how it goes, because we're not live with it yet. But meeting people where they are, I think, is important, because if it's just one more tool and it's just one more thing they don't know how to use, and it's just one more place that they forget how to log into, they're not going to look at it. And so I want to make it a thing that is very easy for people to look at.
Totally. Raheel actually had a really good question about that. And Raheel, good seeing you a couple weeks ago. I'm going to be back out in the Bay Area next month, so I'll be sure to swing by. But I love this question. From a technical perspective, do you map those key results as the stories themselves in Jira? Or thinking about that's how you're architecting it?
I'm thinking about it. I think that I might put them in as initiatives on like a roadmap, but I need to learn more. And there's a guru inside of Nylas that's going to help me with it. As long as they're like connected to each other physically, I don't care. So if you have tips, please feel free to send them my way.
There you go. I'll tell you, Raheel probably has some. Very smart guy, I can tell you that. So, thanks for asking. Cool. We're going to move into one final question. We still have plenty of time. More questions, the better for the Q&A side of things. So if you haven't dropped questions in already, please do it there, and we're happy to answer as many as we can. But this is always one of my favorite questions, regardless of what the actual topic is. we've all gone through building something or implementing something and have stubbed our toe or had just heartburn from something going wrong while doing it. So, the biggest question is, when you think of rolling this out, what are the gotchas and what are the blind spots and some of the pain points that you've either experienced personally or you've seen experienced when you've gone to implement this sort of thing? Darren, we'll kick it off with you.
Yeah, I'd say, we talked about like the weekly and monthly and quarterly readouts. I think if you don't keep a hold on that and you don't keep communicating that OKRs are the core foundation of what you're driving against, what happens is people will start to forget that that's what you're working towards, and it's not at the forefront of the mind. And then you do have that issue like we talked about earlier, which was prioritization. Then something else becomes more important. And then when you highlight and you go back to an OKR, they go, well, yeah, that was before. But if you continually keep that communication open and highlight it on why you set that OKR as that priority level for that quarter, or if you do it on annual basis or monthly basis, and then it keeps it at the forefront to allow you to have, like we talked about earlier, the pushback against why you would change those OKRs. And it allows you to have, Brad, I think you brought it up earlier, being more like engineering, right? Where you have the power to push back. And making sure you bring it up often highlights it. I think one of the highlights for engineering is they talk about their deliverables often. And they do talk about, hey, listen, this is what's going to be delivered here, and this is what we're working on. And it is their top priority. So by us communicating it and keeping visibility into it, transparency into it, we can keep that at the top priority. And, I find that in the past, if we haven't talked about it, it could go by the wayside, and then there could be something else that filters in and consumes it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I completely agree. Yeah, Mallory, where's the heartburn and where's the scar tissue from doing this well, but also probably stubbing your toe through it?
All my past scars revolve around executive alignment or the lack of it, right? So I think that if we don't have a unified and aligned executive team planning together, the risk you run is that each department runs off in their own direction and is doing what they think is best by no fault of their own. But you accidentally end up with, results and plans and initiatives that just clash with each other. And it's like, how did we get to this? What's going on here? How are we working on something that's so different, but, we're both trying to grow this thing. And it's just because we don't all plan at the same time, and we don't all, make sure that we have aligned at that highest level possible before we go forth and create key results. And, in my past with some of the ops teams, one thing that I learned the hard way is that I couldn't really set my objectives and my key results until I knew what everybody else was doing. Because if everything has to kind of flow through your team in order to get out the door, you've got to be able to say, like, your 3 things and your 8 things and your 7 things adds up to too many things. My team cannot support that much. So we've got to start to figure out, where do we prioritize even before we get the key results and the objectives set? Because if you have any kind of bottleneck in delivery, that team has to be able to support the stuff that's going to be going out the door. So I started to hang back more when I was, participating in the process, and it's like, show me yours first, and then I'll figure out, how do I make room for all this stuff?
Exactly. I think that's actually a really, really good point. The sequence of this matters. Sequentially, how you set these for your business, and every business is different. I think we could always make a case of, all right, let's start with our overall revenue goals. Let's start with sales and success, and even what that looks like from a marketing perspective, from a pipeline building and everything like that. How do we as ops folks now go support all 3 of those functions and business units to make sure that they can go hit those? So you're spot on. I'm trying to scratch my head right now and think of, like, all right, how do you playing devil's advocate here? How would you set a RevOps objective without knowing what the greater business objectives are? They'd be pretty hard. I mean, you can, hey, we're gonna go clean up 10% of our tech debt in our sales force. That's probably one that you could do without overarching bigger company things. But at the same time, is that the most important needle mover for the business in the next 90 days or 6 months or 12 months? So I think that's it's a really interesting way to think about it. I'll say it out loud. We are exactly a month, almost 2 months in, a month and a half into tracking OKRs for the first time at Sonar. We've always had our goals mostly based revenue wise, but as our teams continue to grow and we keep building out more and more dedicated departments, it was important for us. And so we obviously went through this together at Terminus, and we've seen how things work really well and how things work poorly in other places. So I told our team, start small. This will inevitably grow, but our biggest advice, just kind of going through it in the past, was yes, we can all be very bullish and really excited and throw out 17 different objectives per department. It's going to get noisy really fast. Let's all really start intentionally on 2 to 3 per department, and let's go from there. The one interesting finding, and again, we're going to start jumping into some Q&A, so get those questions in, folks. The interesting thing that we found there is that, yes, we need to be transparent and talk about how we're tracking these, but while some goals are neurotically tracked, like I can tell you exactly down to the nth degree where we are from a revenue perspective and what goal we're going to hit, all the way down to probably 3 or 4 decimals if I need to. But there's certain objectives. For instance, Melissa on our finance team is working through setting up our pre-audit right now. Not exactly something you track at 23.25% completion. It's kind of binary. Like, did we get the pre-audit done or not? And so, there's things like that we should have to be mindful of. But I love the suggestion you gave. It doesn't have to be percentage based. It can be red, yellow, green. Are we on track with this or not? Are we, switching one tool for another? That's kind of a binary project. We know we can go deep in those tools and how they're actually tracking for implementation, but some of it can come down to just being binary. So I really like that, and just being transparent and overly communicative. The one question I have for both of y'all, and as questions, again, I'll keep pushing everybody in the chat to jump in. How do you create the alignment between departments that really don't have a lot of skin in each other's game? Probably one of the best ways I can think about this, like think about marketing and engineering. Now, of course, we're all creating a product together and we're trying to take it to market and go win. But when they don't have necessarily overlapping objectives, how do you get enrollment across different departments for one person to say, yeah, I'm really bought into what your objective is over there in engineering. And oh, by the way, marketing, as an engineering leader, I'm really bought into your goal too. How do you drive that collaboration across departments?
I think for me, it would be more highlighted around the similarities of what the overall objective is for the organization, right? That's why it's so important to have it from the executive team down, because everything can be a subsidiary of that overall company objective, right? And you brought up a good point earlier, Brad, where you're worried about, not necessarily able to getting your goal set or your objective set before they've been created by, let's say, the EC, right? And that's one of the things that I've noticed. Your executive team, they're incredibly busy, but they care about what's important and what they are told is important, right? And I think having somebody own that and collect some problem statements and saying, hey, let's go to the field, let's understand what problems we're dealing with. Let's bring these together and consolidate them and bring them to the executive team and say, hey, I'm waiting for some objectives or some OKRs from you guys so we can set our goals. And you go about that a month early before the end of the quarter. And then you say, here's a list of some stuff that we've surveyed across the organization that we think we've identified, right? Give them the information to make those decisions so that they can come together and make a decision around an OKR and deliver some guidelines. And then from there, you can kind of bring the different departments together by how they, support each other's initiatives in order to achieve the overall company objective.
Yeah, I love that. Mallory, what do you think about keeping everybody aligned? That's one of the core tenets to RevOps, is making sure that all of our departments know what we're all doing. What do you think?
I agree. It's so important. And it's not that easy, but I think I do nerd out on the challenge of connecting those dots for people. And I'm the person that's like, no, wait, I'll explain how it is all the same. I'll coach you through the way that this is all connected. And I think at product companies, it's easier. And this is not necessarily an OKR related answer, but if you are really kind of putting the customer at the center of everything you do, there's no way for any one department to not get on the same page about how to make that customer successful. And if you're an engineer who's trying to develop the product and you're thinking of the story and the problem you're solving and what you're building and what you're trying to help, how is your product helping that user? Marketing is doing the same exact thing in the way that they craft their messaging with pain points to attract buyers. they should be very closely linked to each other. Is that going to come out like 100% in objective? I mean, hopefully, maybe not that clear cut, but just having, those problem statements that I think, like, I'm going to probably steal that a lot, Darren, because I think that if you boil it down to the problem statements, they're probably not that different. And it's all about creating that value and making the customer understand, like, we do think we can help you. Do think this is the value. Especially right now at Nylas, we are in the middle of launching a brand new trial experience. And so it's a big deal for us because we're really embracing this product-led motion a little bit more than we have in the past. And so one of our company objectives for the year is that any Nylas user can build and launch their integration in one day. And so that's like the lofty objective that we're reaching. And it takes longer than that in the old way, but it touches everything in marketing. We've got like a developer relations team. We've got a documentation team that does all of the things associated with getting people through that process. And so I feel like we have achieved this kind of lockstep between marketing and product and engineering that's not very common. I'm ranting at this point, but I just think it's so cool. And I think that's the point of operations, is to help people understand, like, no, you guys really are doing the same thing. And what you do impacts what this person does. And how many times have you read the messaging on somebody's website and then you go to their product and it's not even the same world? You're like, what is happening here? Like, your messaging on your website doesn't tell the story of what your product is doing. And that's what happens when you don't have that collaboration.
Totally. I completely agree. I think the one thing, I'm trying to date back into the conversation I had. It might have been a conversation I had with Gleb a long time ago about aligning a lot of that. And it kind of leads into Kristen's question, which I'm going to pop on the screen too. Look, you might not directly impact somebody else's objective, but at the end of the day, there is a set of those at the very top of the business that are impacting every single person, all the way down from the head of HR, an executive assistant, a janitor, or a CEO. It doesn't matter. And I thought it was really cool. Again, it might have been Gleb that said it, was at some point, and we'll talk about some commissioning or compensation here in a second, have some skin in the game for somebody else's OKR that you might not have full control over, but you at least have accountability towards. And it gives you the authority and the autonomy to go to someone way outside of your department and say, hey, I know I can't tactically help you commit all this code or push this new release, but I'm here to support you to make sure you're on track, because a little bit of my compensation is involved in it as well. So I thought that was a really unique, and I'm going to give Gleb credit for it. I don't know if it was him that told me, but I almost can date back to when him and I talked about that.
Yeah.
I love this question from Kristen too. We talked briefly about bonusing, but commissioning RevOps teams, yay or nay? Have you heard pros and cons of both? And we'll be sensitive to how you all bonus and comp yourselves and your team. But yeah, this is a big question. People ask me this a lot. How do you go about incentive-based comp for a RevOps team? So I'd be curious to see what y'all have heard and seen what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. I'll let you go, Mallory, and I'll follow up.
Okay.
Yeah.
This one's hard. Personally, I am not the profile of someone who's super motivated by a big bonus. And I think that could be common among operations people. It might not, but it's definitely not the same profile as a salesperson who's extremely motivated by every action leads to $1. And I can predictably measure the way that that's going to work out for myself. It's just not really how I'm wired. I have never done like a variable compensation for a RevOps team based on an output or an activity or counting up a number of things to be done. So I don't know if I think that it's the right way to go. I just know that I'm personally not all that motivated by it. I love bonus plans that do focus on the overarching company success. Whatever that is, whether it's ARR or growth or whatever the big milestones are that the company is trying to get to. I love the idea of incentivizing many people at the company on that, because you're all working toward this common goal. You're all celebrating success together. You can't get there with only sales. You need everybody to get to, these big objectives that you have as a company.
Yeah. Go ahead, Darren.
I would say, I agree with Mallory on having it tied to something that's more like a global company metric, right? Because, as like businesses and SaaS are understanding, it's about the full customer life cycle at this standpoint, right? And RevOps is going to have a piece of just about everything in that realm, but there's also aspects of the business in finance or engineering or other areas of the business that require some optimization for the company to be healthy. And I think the important goal is that there's two things you're focused on: is delivering a good customer experience for your customers, right? And making sure that you run a healthy business. And having a bonus structure around something like EBITDA or something like that, I think, is a reasonable expectation. I think the one thing I'd love is like an equity play. Somebody does a really good job and you've delivered value for the organization, you give them ownership because they are acting as an owner, right? And I think when you think about that and the implications of them having been bought in that much more, purely because they have an ownership stake in the game. Commission, I think, is unique to a behavior, right? I think in sales, you do a commission because you're paid to do a job, you do a job. And then I think in revenue operations, you touch so many facets of the business that it'd be difficult to pick a metric because then you'd be too focused on one area and not focused on the bigger picture, which is what the whole point of revenue operations is connecting all the different portions of the customer journey together.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
That's a great
point.
You
got $5 every time you deleted an unused field, then you wouldn't do anything else.
That's exactly right. Darren, you made me remember this old quote when my old bosses for like my first job told me this. It's think like a customer and act like an owner. And if you kind of embody that a little bit, it's like, all right, am I making the best decision regardless of what my role is in the business? Am I thinking like what is best for our customer? And also, do I have some autonomy to act like an owner? Like, do I have the keys to it? Sorry, you hear our dog barking in the background. Like, can we actually control that? So that's a fantastic question. Great responses too. I know we have one quick one. I'll throw it up there for Matthew because I know we're getting close to the end of time. Also, we're going to hang out, or at least I'm going to hang out after this. If everybody looks in the top right corner, you'll see lounge. I'm going to open up a lounge to where folks can join and we can all have a lovely virtual happy hour together and kind of keep this conversation going. But Matthew, won't leave you hanging. I love this question. Have you ever created individual OKRs for employees? If so, do you typically align them with the department or the company? We did. And I think it's important that you still have folks that have individual OKRs that, yes, they can still roll up and impact the business. Now, it might not go all the way up to the company-wide objective, but there is still a path to get there for them. So I'm a fan of making sure that there's something there still on a personal level or on an IC level that is directly impacted in the growth of their side. But yeah, curious, Mallory, Darren, how y'all think about individual OKRs?
I think for me, sorry, go ahead, Mallory.
No. Go ahead this time.
Yeah. I think for me, it's important. I'm just like zoning in on one portion of what you wrote there, Matt, which is, ever created individual OKRs for somebody? Like, have I ever created them for somebody? No. And I think part of that methodology is you got to weigh in to get buy-in. I believe it's like the advantage by Lencioni, right? And you go through some of these aspects of the planning aspect. I think you should give them the opportunity to develop their own OKRs and guide them in the means of understanding how they can build an OKR for their own professional development. But in the means of doing a tactical plan, which is what we outline as you allow them to pick a tactical plan, and then in that they have their own key result to understand that did they meet their tactical objective, right? And you have those milestones. It's kind of like a light introduction into OKR principles, right? And you have them own something and have them develop it so that they can say, hey, I know this objective. I know what this key result. I know how I can impact that, and have them use some of their problem solving skills to kind of level up their career a little bit and understand, hey, I can impact that. And this is how I'm going to be a part of this team. And it may require some guidance, but I try personally not to deliver a OKR for somebody, but try to guide them into developing their own. Yeah.
I like that a lot. Yeah, I like that approach a lot. I think that different companies are at varying stages of doing this. So I have done it both ways. In the businesses where people are getting their bonus based on their OKRs, everybody's got them, right? Because that is key component for compensation. And, not a fan of that, but as you think through the other options there, I think I've seen, goal setting and project planning as it's related to almost more of like a professional development plan, which I think, Darren, is kind of what you're getting at as well. It's, here's how I want to develop personally. Here's the things that I want to learn, the things I want to do, my main objectives that I know are helping the company this quarter. That planning process is important, especially just for people to be able to articulate how they've grown, how they've contributed, and to feel that connection back to the business. But I don't think it has to be in the very strict OKR wording per se. It just depends on what works for your teams.
Totally. The one thing that we've done, we haven't necessarily baked it fully into the OKR side at the individual level, but we talk about professional development plans. One thing Jack and I started from day one with our business was creating professional development plans for every employee. We actually have we call it our PDP. Every employee has a certain amount of access to capital, access to money to go and get a new certification, go to a new event, go to a conference, take a class, read a book, do whatever you need to do. But you are responsible for your own journey as well. It's not something that should be voluntold to you from an executive or your leader. You should show enough excitement about yourself to go and find something that's going to help you. Or some companies, Sonar, we're willing to pay for that for folks. But we bake that into promotion plans. Like, hey, I can help you achieve X, Y, and Z metric here at Sonar, but if you're not helping yourself build in your career, I need to see it out of you as well. It's not just me that's going to drag you along. I need you to run with me. So really, really fun way of thinking about it, and potentially incorporating that into just overall employment plans and not necessarily just for OKRs. But I know we're at the top of time. I mean, we're actually a few minutes over. So I know it is a busy Thursday for a lot of folks. Busy for me in a sense that I get to jump over to the lounge and hopefully have a virtual happy hour with folks. But Darren, Mallory, I cannot thank y'all both enough for joining. This was a great conversation. And I know everybody in the chat and a lot of folks who attended have just taken away a ton of nuggets. I was writing down notes to myself to incorporate them here at Sonar. So really appreciate you both joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And all right, we're going to try this. This is the first time, full disclosure, where we jump into the lounge. And if anybody wants to jump in, keep the conversation going, I'll be there. But yeah, looking forward to seeing other folks on the other side. We will talk soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Too.
If I can open this lounge up now, let's see what happens. All right.
Let's go.
Let's go. Join.